Y'all, I don't know which way to turn and what to believe at this point with the Natalia Grace documentary and case. So today we're going to talk about some updates in it, as well as some more information that I've been reviewing in regards to how old she really is. Hello Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa, which is still behind me. Roscoe is under the sofa because he's just as turned around as I am. Now, as you heard in my little intro, we're going to be continuing on with the Natalia Grace case. If this is your first time to my channel, I just did a review of the docuseries, The Curious Case of Natalia Grace, and it was kind of just like a stream of thought type thing, and I just went over all my thoughts on that. I'll link the video below. It'll also be at the end when that little up next thing comes. Anyways, so what we're going to be specifically talking about in this video today are a few different things. First of all, a couple of updates. The GoFundMe that has come out, I got some thoughts on that. And Ask Me Anything that was put out almost like as a, advertisement for the show by the prosecutor who was in it, the blonde-haired woman, Beth. And then we're also going to be talking about, we're going to be reviewing some video clips. Video clips of a reporter who was talking about the evidence that the prosecutors released in regard to the evidence that they had saying that she is actually really how old she claims to be. Then we're going to be going over the Dr. Phil episode that the new mother, her adoptive mother, Cynthia, as well as Natalia went on, I think back in like 2019 or something, because I'm going to review that. So anyways, go ahead, buckle up, and let's get going. Okay, now first, let's start by looking at this news clip. It's by the reporter Vinny Martorano, I hope I'm saying his name right, and he's kind of introducing this, and he's also going to be introducing the prosecutor in this little clip. Now, I've kind of put just some of the period of information that I want to speak about in this, so let's watch it in its full length, and then we're going to discuss it. Now, just preemptively, what this is he's saying, look, this is what happened with this case. When it went to trial, when we're talking about the Barnetts, when they went to trial for abandoning Natalia, certain evidence was not allowed in. The judge made this decision. It will be explained in this clip. Now, basically, after this all got settled and everything, the parents didn't get in trouble, all that type stuff, the prosecutor was like, look, everybody needs to know the evidence that we had, right, because it's so murky. And so that's what this clip is about. Let's roll tape, and then we'll dish.
Yeah, Marley, this evidence wasn't allowed to be used in the court or trial because it came 5 years before Michael and Christine Bartlett were initially charged. Now that Christine's charges have been dropped and Michael was found innocent, the Tippecanoe County Prosecutor's Office wants everybody to know the full story. According to the statute of limitations, the trial court ruled any evidence outside of the 5 years before the charges were initially set were prohibited to be used in court. The information they released includes everything from her birth certificate, medical records, adoption documents, and even the refusal of maternal rights that proves who her biological. All of this information highlights that Natalia's actual birthday is September 4th, 2003.
Natalia was a child. The Indiana State Police sent 2 detectives, and we sent one of our deputy prosecuting attorneys to Ukraine in 2019. This is before the war over there. They were able to actually find and meet Natalia's birth mother. And DNA samples were taken from her, brought back to the Indiana State Police lab, which showed that she was the natural mother of Natalia. The purpose of this is not to go so much into what happened or didn't happen in court. The purpose is to say, here's what we have from the start of an investigation all the way through. And not one person, one doctor, not a dentist, not any government official, contradicts her birth date at all.
Well, that was a doozy. Now, here's my thing with that, and side note, I'm babysitting little Coco here, and she was barking, so that's why I'm holding her. I forgot. I was like, people are going to be like, where did this dog come from? But that's where she's from. So she's also Sofa Squad member, but Roscoe holds it down. Anyways, okay, so when I watched this, I was like, what do you say to this, right? Now, if you watch my earlier video that I mentioned about the docuseries, I kind of walked away with like, look, I don't really believe any of these people, right? And as far as the age thing went, I was like, look, you know what? I don't think that she was 22 or 18 when they adopted her, but I don't think she was 6. Well, if you go by this information, what do you say to this, right? She had to have been. There's so much proof that they had, and again, it was suppressed. Now, on that note, again, we'll talk about this as we look at some of these clips and whatnot, because one thing that I really walked away from the docuseries with, as well as this case, and still to this day, is that I feel like Natalia has been constantly surrounded by people who exploit her, right? And again, if you watch my other video, I said really the only people from that I believed was the neighbors at the first apartment, because none of them were doing anything to gain notoriety, get money from Natalia, anything like that. Now again, I do feel like after going down my own research into like just kind of facts about the case, whatever, I do feel like, as most of these series are, there is some, sensationalism in there, some blurry facts, some things that weren't right, that type thing, right? So there's a part of me that when I look at this case and I look at the interviews and this and that, I feel like I believe one thing, but then I don't believe the other. And again, faced with this evidence of the prosecutors, like, look, we've got the birth certificate, we've got this, we've got that, we have the DNA from the mother that says she was her. And I'm like this, I'm like, even if the mom was lying, because trust me, I have looked at every angle of this. And because I do feel like I said, everyone that has surrounded Natalia, there was some angle that they had, right? So I was like, okay, what would the birth mother get from lying about her age, meaning Natalia's? Okay, they've proved that this woman is the mother, and they know that woman's age. Okay. What would she get? Because basically it was like, look, if Natalia was grown up like they're saying she was, this woman would have been 10 years old. Now, here's the thing. We've heard of stranger things, right? I mean, we've heard of stuff like this a lot of times in abuse cases, very young people having a child. However, there's all this other documented evidence to back up that Natalia was young. Now, that being said, it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe there could have been some misrepresentation of the age and whatnot. I would want to know, specifically like, was it a couple of years off, that type thing? Were the Barnetts led to think one thing? Now, again, one thing that I get when watching this too, in her interviews and whatnot, is I go back and forth. We're going to talk about the interview that we're going to see, and we're going to kind of hit on a lot of things that I heard people talk about in the comment section. Now, also, the Behavior channel did a video on this. If you don't watch them, go back and watch it, because they're a great team to watch. Now, also, here's the thing. They are credentialed up, right? They're the professionals. I'm just a guy with a sofa, right? I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not any of that stuff. These are just my opinions, like, anybody just watching this and coming up with them, and then like doing my own little research and forming these opinions, but it doesn't come from any kind of credentialed place. So I'm not going to be going through this Dr. Phil stuff, talking about, oh, well, I know the answers to this and that, and because she blinked twice here, it means that it ain't going to be like that. Okay. It's just going to be some of my opinions, and a lot of it, honestly, is on the adoptive parents, because I question their motivation in this, especially when we get to the GoFundMe. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of Natalia's behavior as well, that was described, I mean, I do think can be related to just being a victim of abuse, right? Now, does that mean that I think she's completely honest? No, I think she's a survivalist, right? She's had to. Does that think that I mean that she was some 30-year-old or 20-year-old living with the Barnetts? No, I don't. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go ahead and start looking at some of these Dr. Phil clips. Then after that, we're going to talk about the GoFundMe. And then after that, we'll also talk about that Ask Me Anything. So let's go ahead and roll the first clip.
In her freezer. I was like, well, I have a couple kids at home. Come on down. You can play with them, talk with us, whatever. So she came to our house and hung out down there, and she never left.
Now, I just wanted to kind of put this as an intro to let you know how they met if you haven't really watched a lot of this. So this is the adoptive mother, Cynthia, and obviously this is Natalia here. Now, we're going to hear Natalia talk about her age here shortly. Now, also in this, the mother saying, hey, we found her at this apartment. This is a secondary apartment that Natalia went to when the adoptive parents, the Barnetts, went to Canada. And so you hear here, she went up there. She was kind of surprised, like, you're by yourself. Didn't believe she was 22. And then she comes down there and never leaves. Now, this is completely different story and vibe that the neighbors from the first apartment had, where they didn't think that she was a child, but they were also like just questioning a lot of things on the same note, but the behaviors that started coming out were like a little suspect. And I just mentioned that because I just think it's worth mentioning, not so much from Natalia, but possibly the motivations of the people that she is surrounded with. And we'll get more into that as we watch the clips. So let's keep going.
She's been with us ever since.
Is that like you to do something like that?
We do
When you
help.
just find this random person on the street and say, come hang out with us?
Well, not typically. We help a lot of people, but my motherly heart was like, there's no way she could take care of herself.
So as you see here, like I said, she's like, there's no way you can take care of yourself. Now, this is very similar to what the other neighbors said as regards to that. Because even though the other neighbors thought she was older, and these neighbors think that, specifically Cynthia, that she's, the whatever, 8, 6, whatever it was, both of them basically agree, we don't think she can take care of herself with her physical limitations, and living in this apartment by herself. Now, also worth noting is the apartment that Cynthia met her at, she, meaning Natalia, lived upstairs. So again, she's having to haul herself upstairs, do all this type stuff. So let's continue.
I was like, I can't just leave her there.
How old were you at that time?
I was 8 years old, maybe almost 9.
So,
Okay, so this is beginning with the age stuff. 8 years old, living there, almost 9 possibly. Now, here's the thing, and I've gone down a rabbit hole in the comment section, y'all. Seeing, one thing I love about the comment sections is you can read people's, personal history with things of this nature or examples and stuff like that. So a lot of people are like, absolutely no way an 8-year-old, could live on their own like this. And I mean, I agree, especially when you're sitting here thinking, your typical 8-year-old. However, there's also these scenarios where somebody is forced to grow up really fast. And I would sit here and also argue that she wasn't necessarily thriving and living, if you will. She was surviving, barely type situation. Now, also worth noting, and the mother will say this as well, the mother meaning Cynthia, is that this go round, the Barnetts were gone to Canada. Beforehand, they were coming by every now and then, mostly the dad. There was that level of interaction going on, but this time she was just all off on her own, because technically in their world, this is like a 20-something-year-old, right? So they're like, psh, 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 let's keep going. So let's continue.
at 8 years old, you're living alone in an apartment.
Yes.
And you're getting your own groceries.
I actually didn't even go grocery shopping. My landlord took me to it was like a gas station or something just to pick up a couple things.
Well, where'd you get your food?
The Barnetts, they had given me like food that they didn't really eat, like canned foods and stuff like that.
Now, does this sound on brand for the Barnetts? Absolutely. Another thing that I saw a lot of was people talking about Natalia basically utilizing her situation and all this as a form of manipulation. Now, I can see that in some of her responses she'll come up with, and I'll call those out when we get to them. But I also am of the frame of mind of this is someone who is almost like, on the street surviving type situation. Granted, she had a roof over her head. I get that. But it's a survival instinct. So I'm sure that she did learn very early on, like, oh, this is what I need to do. Now, the Barnetts would make mention of this, but again, I barely believe a word that they say. But the father and the docuseries have made a mention about her, doing something about hopping out of the van and wanting people to see her, to be like, this poor, little vulnerable girl kind of a thing. And he didn't believe it or whatever. Now, again, like I said, I don't necessarily believe much of what he said, but I can also see someone in her situation needing to utilize this scenario to get what they need.
I didn't really want to leave the apartment, but I had to go to school.
So you went to school.
Yes.
How far was the school?
Maybe about a block away from the house.
So this is a new school?
Yes.
An adult school.
Christine, she had signed me up right after I moved in,
Okay.
after that day.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about here, is this little clip in regard to some things kind of being blurry and whatnot. Now, again, it could just be the way she talks, but when she's talking and she's like, oh, I got to go to school, you're envisioning, at least I was at first, although I'd watched the documentary so I knew what it was, but pretend you didn't, like, oh, an 8-year-old getting themselves up to go to middle school or whatever you're in at that grade or that age. And only until the adoptive mother says it was an adult school, she kind of breaks in with that. Now, again, is Natalia doing this on purpose? I don't know, right? It could just be the way she talks, because in her world, it might be school. Now, what she's referring to is like a GED place. But nonetheless, this is one of those kind of blurry things where it's almost like making it out to sound a little bit more than what it was. It's like, okay, well, you're going to that. Now, on that note, I want to know, because if she was 8, 9 years old at this time, going to a GED school, with the history she's talking about, what are the transcripts? What do they say? How did that scenario go? If anyone knows where to point me, drop it in the comments.
It sounds like you were in a group home in the Ukraine, and you come here when you're 6. And here's what I know about children that are in group homes. They're almost always developmentally delayed. So if you come here from a group home at 6, best case, you're probably functioning at developmentally at 4 or 5. So you go into an apartment functioning at 6 or 7. A 6 or 7-year-old child living in an apartment alone for a year, that's just not believable to me.
Couple of things with this clip, and before we even talk about what Dr. Phil said, one thing that really stood out to me during this whole interview, and I'm going to put a picture up here of it, is how the mother and the father sat and interacted with one another. Opposite ends of the sofa, not really looking. He's very quiet most of the interview. It was very odd to me. Now again, this is just my opinion. It don't mean nothing. I am not credentialed to sit here and say, well, because he was sitting in this position and she moved her hand this way, this is what it means. I mean, I don't know how that works, right? I'm going to trust the other people who do. So that part is very weird to me, though. And again, some of the responses they'll come up with and whatnot, and some of the interactions that they have, we'll talk about, because it seems very off. Again, I question all the motivations of any adult in her life. I question it of these people, the Barnetts. I'm not saying the people who had her before the Barnetts, because I don't know anything about that. But all the story that they talk about and whatnot, I just am like, this is somebody who just seems to have been thrown into, you know, a den of vipers, right? And there's that. But we'll talk about my overall feelings of, you know what, she's happy type thing towards the end of the video. For now, let's keep going.
How does that happen?
I think that she groomed her before she did this to have her ready for this.
But in terms...
Notice how in this clip, this is right after the last one that we watched as far as the time sequence goes, they both look at the mother, right? Natalia and the husband. They both look at her like, well, yeah, how did this happen? And again, I'm not trying to say this one's lying or this one's doing that, but there's something off with this. There's something off with this energy, with this vibe. I don't know what it is. Again, this is several years ago. But there's something off with it, and I can't put my finger on it.
They say that you scammed them, that you lied about your age and came over here and terrorized them.
It's not true at all.
And if that were true,
It's
it would have
not
been exhibited
different
with
age.
you. You haven't seen that.
Right.
And we have other children. We have a grandson. She does nothing but loves her siblings and her nephew. She has never showed any signs of those things that they say she did.
She acts just like a big sister. She makes bottles for them. She gets
She
their
helps
clothes
with
if
baths.
she needs
She
to. She makes them
changes
lunch
diapers.
sometimes. Yeah.
Everything that the next brother or sister would do for their siblings, she does.
Okay, now this was a big thing that I saw a lot of, and I also had a lot of opinions on it. Now also, I'm kind of speaking in the sense of, I know a lot of you have already watched my first video, but there might be some new people here. So I explained a lot of this in the first video. So I am not a foster kid, but I have been of this system. I have worked and volunteered in it, worked with kids in that system. And one thing that I have seen is that you can see a placement that acts one way in one certain environment and then a completely different way in another one. Now, that being said, does that mean that I 100% believe what everybody here is saying? No, because on one level, there's always going to be something, right? And I'm not trying to say it's the one thing in this is that they're lying about their age and pulling knives on everybody. I mean, I'm not trying to say that, right? I have no doubt that Natalia could have acted completely different in this home, because also, I'm sorry, but if you watch the docuseries, you saw the behavior of the father, right? And heard of the mother. So there was a lot going in that house. I have no doubts that there was stuff going on that would make someone act out. I also now very much question how much of that information is true for Natalia's behavior, right? Now, a lot of the behavior they described, I was like, oh yeah, this is almost like textbook, someone who's been abused, and in a system like this acting out, like the over-sexualization, things like that. Now, here's the thing. If they were to sit here and prove and be like, yeah, Paul, we got video, 100% video of her pulling a knife and doing this and blah, 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 blah. Yes, that is concerning. Yes, if you have other children in the home. Now, if she has sat here and gone to a new home, fallen in line, and is like, hey, you know what? This is the vibe I'm looking for, right? Then, hey, more power to her, okay? But I also think that they are fudging. When I say they in this, I'm talking about the adoptive parents and Natalia, because it's too rosy of a picture. Now, do I expect them to get on Dr. Phil and be like, well, you know what? She actually still does this. No, right? So again, I'm taking a lot of things like a grain of salt. Is that how that saying goes? I don't know. Anyways, let's keep going.
Were you at all concerned at the time that we could be putting the children that we have in jeopardy?
We were not.
I didn't get that impression because when I seen Natalia, I looked at her physical disability as well. Just her behavior in itself did not come off in any kind of manner.
Now, again, this comes down to a he said, she said. They're claiming that they're having this experience. None of that was there. One thing I saw a lot of in the comment sections about this is when you want to kind of look at both angles of it, of, okay, well, she would have had time to learn that she has to reel her behavior in, and, you know, she did this, and this is like another form of manipulation, basically. And, hey, could be, right? 100% could be. Again, I don't think that it would be abnormal for someone to not completely act out totally. And so what I'm trying to say is, I think she could have gone to this placement, and not even a placement, but you know what I'm saying, like end up in this house and not be exhibiting this bizarre behavior. And again, now at this point, we really have to question everything the Barnett said, right? A lot of that is just, you know, it just doesn't seem legit. And again, I do the same thing with these parents. I'm not sitting here trying to say, oh, she gets free pass and all this type of stuff. Everything I've ever seen, there's always some kind of behavioral issue. It's a spectrum, right? And so I feel like they're not going to just go into all the little details of it here, because obviously, you know, they're trying to do, you know, public image, or, you know, what do you call it when you're trying to, you know, save somebody's image or that type thing, you know, damage control is the word I'm looking for. So yeah, but it wouldn't surprise me if these people did not speak of her pulling knives and this type of stuff. Now, the one thing that does concern me is the fact that the neighbors all talked about this over-sexualization, and all these kids that they have, meaning these new adoptive parents have in the home. That part is concerning to me, because I'm like, you know, like, you know, do we have a thumb down on that? You know, because again, in the last docuseries, I trusted more of what the neighbors had to say than what the Barnetts had to say. And this seemed to be a recurring theme. Now, again, you could also say, well, maybe the neighbors all didn't want her there, and that she might have done something creepy once, but then they all jumped on this bandwagon. You know, I try and look at all the different angles to see where people could be coming from. So there's that. Let's keep going.
You say you're 16. Are you a 33-year-old scam artist?
No. 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 I promise you I'm not.
This was another one that a lot of people had something to say about. A lot of people were like, she's laughing at them and da-da-da-da-da, and you know, pulling one over and all this. And so I'm looking at it from two different ways. Number one, like, yeah, you could view it that like with Bobby. She's like, you idiots, of course I'm not. You're falling for this. Or it's almost like absurd to her, where it's like, I'm not, like, everybody thinks I'm this huge, like, you know, seasoned criminal scammer, and, you know, I'm not. You know, I didn't go any direction with this part at all, because I looked at it both ways, where I was like, I can see that and whatnot. Now, we'll talk about my opinion on her face, her bone structure, that type thing, in regards to how old I think she looks. We'll talk about that more later, because in a little bit, when we get into her age, which we're about to get into. So let's continue getting into it.
There's been a lot of controversy, obviously, about your age because of the family that you were with before. How old are you?
I'm 16.
You're 16?
Yes.
When is your birthday?
September 4th, 2003.
Okay. Now, this was another clip that a lot of people had a lot of stuff to say. And if I remember correctly, in the behavior panel, they were talking about the when's your birthday, and she was like, that kind of a thing, a pause. Yes, there is something here that seems odd, that seems rehearsed. But again, we have all this evidence now that says that's when her birthday is. Now, also, I look at it two ways. It's like it could be rehearsed, it could be this, it could be that. But also, you know, she was being told multiple things of you savor you're 22 and probably this is your birthday. So I read into it two ways, where I was like, okay, I could kind of see the, my birthday is this, or, I mean, my God, I have to sit here and damn near take my shoes off to be able to count up how old I am at this point, right? So with her, I was like, well, she might be like, okay, it's this, right? Because she's basically been told she has like multiple different birthdays at one time. So this part didn't do anything for me in regard to swaying me one way or the other.
I was in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Yes.
And how long did you stay with that family?
2 years.
How many families do you think you were with total?
I actually don't really remember all the families, but Christine said that I was with at least like 30 families. Like one was in New York, and then some other places. I don't remember what she said.
30 families? Like for a couple of days? And
I don't know. I don't remember being with that many families.
so when you went to the family in New Hampshire and you left there, why did you leave there?
I think it happened because they had 2 boys, and one of the boys, me and him were really close, so we like wrestled almost. But I landed on his arm wrong, so the mom thought I was trying to break his arm.
Okay, well, I've got several things to say about this one. A lot of people had a lot to say about this, okay? Now, here's the thing with this specifically. Okay, first of all, yes, the story about the broken arm thing is completely sus, right? I get this. And then this also is kind of like, okay, well, she's having this rosy picturesque time with this family, but then, you know, the Barnett said this over here, and now there's a story about this over here that she broke an arm. More than that, or tried to break an arm, whatever, is I have concerns about, well, a couple of things in the statement. First of all, when she was like, oh, like 30 homes, I was in New Hampshire, and she's talking about some of the people, obviously, that had her before the Barnetts. And, you know, Dr. Phil's like, what, 30 homes? And she's like, well, Christine told me that. Here's my thing with this case overall, and I'm not necessarily pinning this on Natalia because, again, a lot of this would have been just told to her or whatever. Timelines feel so weird with this case, right? Like anytime you start adding it up, it's like, okay, so you were supposed to come over at this age, but then you did this for 2 years, and then you did 30 homes, but then this would have made it for you only had a year to do this. You see where I'm going with this? Where it's like, what? None of this makes sense. That's the whole thing with this case. No matter which way you turn, none of it makes sense, and it's very frustrating. And this feeds into the who's telling the truth. Now, again, with the Barnetts, do I think that they would lie to her and tell her you've been with 30 homes and whatnot? Absolutely. Do I think she would possibly lie about that? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I would think she would have more memory of it on some level if you've gone to 30 different homes, because she doesn't speak that way. And in fact, she's very blurry about this whole thing of where she's been, which feeds into the whole thing going on of people not really believing her and thinking it's a scam. That part definitely raises red flags with me, with like everyone involved in this. Now, also what was concerning to me in this statement was when she was like, oh, they had a son and, you know, we were close and we were wrestling, I guess. Just given the context of the stories that the neighbors said and whatnot about the over-sexualization and things she was doing, and then you're sitting here like, okay, this is a pattern that she does. Why does she have this vibe around the males? And again, it could be based in trauma and her own abuse that she's gone through. I have no doubt she's gone through that. But then that also makes me say, well, then why is all of a sudden this not happening in this home, right? And that's where, again, if they're working on it, well, they might want to put her out there like that, right? I get that, because it's like, okay, she's already been trashed in the media. We don't want to put this out there that we had an incident on this date with her. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, this clip gives me a lot of red flags in many directions.
So then that's when she was like, I can't do this anymore.
And when she said she can't do this anymore, what was this? What did she mean, I can't do this anymore?
I don't know.
Again, red flaggy when somebody's saying this and she's saying that those words, like, I can't do this anymore. Now, again, could this be somebody who was overburdened and just over it, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back? 100%, right? We weren't there. And that's the other thing with this case, because we were not there, because we do not know, we're never going to know all the facts. Like, only Natalia at the end of the day is going to know a lot of this, and the birth mother. Because if the birth mother's sitting over there like, I 100% gave birth to her 2003, September, whatever it was, you know, and America has just gone, you know, off the deep end with this, right? They're really the only two who will know, but Natalia's the only one that's going to know her story, what has happened to her and where she has been. If she really is this young, and I mean, the evidence to me, the physical pragmatic evidence looks like it. Now, granted, they did say it's very easy to forge these, you know, documents or the birth certificate and whatnot, but there's all this other stuff. So that's where you're getting into, okay, this is a lot to forge all this. So that's where I just really get like, okay, you know what? I do think she's probably this younger age, but it just seems off about it, right? So before we get all into that, let's just watch a couple more clips.
They accepted you?
Yes, the first 3
You
months.
felt
yes.
safe there.
Yes.
What was your first clue that it was heading down a bad road?
It was after my surgery when she started questioning about my age. And then, like, everything started happening after that one moment.
Okay, now in this part right here where he's talking about like it was after the first surgery and this and whatnot. Now there's other stuff about some of the other families, and this probably has happened with her because at the end of the day, all the stuff and care she's going to need is very expensive. So people might get her, and whether they want to or not want to adopt her, that's going to be a concern. That's going to be a barrier because not only with money, but with time, right? And so I could 100% see the Barnetts being like, wait a minute, you know, we brought this girl in, we thought it kind of was going to make us look good and charitable. Now it's real. Now these surgeries coming out, all this crazy stuff. She's got to go, right? 100%. If you watched it and saw the dad's behavior, I mean, y'all, come on, right? We usually see behavior like that ending up on trial for wiping numerous people out in these cases that we watch. So I have no doubt that that could have been plausible, but again, I wasn't there. We don't know. Only certain people were there and can speak to it.
She's been with us for almost 7 years. To this day, she does not have a menstrual.
Not one.
Christine did not say anything about bloody clothing or anything to me. And she said that I had one, and she had me use a tampon, and ever since then, I've never...
So she had you use a tampon one
Yes.
time?
And there was spottage, I guess. I don't know why. And she's like, see, that's blood. And
That's probably...
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things here. Again, now if you've watched the series and whatnot, then you'll know this is a huge thing that they were like, oh, she was hiding, you know, the fact that she was, you know, having a menstrual cycle. And now here's what she's saying here. And again, the truth lies somewhere in between. Now, listening to how she's describing this and after seeing the behavior of the Barnetts, I'm like, I could imagine something like this happening, right? You know, and I've also seen a lot of comments from people talking about, look, there is, you know, I know someone, so I went through this myself where I developed early and whatnot, which is what allegedly she went through. Also very interesting at the end where the mom, Cynthia, goes, well, that could have been the, and they both were like, don't say anything. If you want, and again, y'all, speculation here, okay? Speculation, all right? This is just opinion. This is not a, you know, whatever. If you watch the docuseries, the very last one, it does some stuff that, in my opinion, the way they did it was, number one, tabloidist sensationalist, to make it look like there might have been something inappropriate going on in the home with the dad and possibly her. They did not say those words. They just did a thing, and you'll have to watch it for yourself to come to your own opinion if you haven't watched it. But to me, it was almost like the Christine, the original adoptive mother, was maybe trying to insinuate that. And yeah, the Michael or Mr. Barnett's like, I'm done. Unmic me. I can't. I'm not even talking about this. Blah, 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 you know, all his drama and stuff. So when Cynthia said this, I was like, this is more of the, like, nobody talks about it, right? Because that's a huge allegation. And again, there's no proof of this that I know of. If somebody has gone, you know, and found stuff or whatever statements, let me know. But I just got a suspicious vibe off of this behavior from her. And then immediately my mind went back to that last episode of that. But again, just like with this case, can you believe everything that's presented? No, these docuseries are always so slanted and so one-sided. You know, it's almost just like, what angle they're going with, that's the only thing they're going to present to you.
Never.
Did you ever want to stab them?
No.
Did you ever make plans to stab them?
No. If I ever went in the room, it was to wake them up because I was either scared of a nightmare or something like that.
Alrighty. So this part here, number one, of course she's going to say no, she didn't want to do those things. I mean, who wouldn't? Like, who after all this would be like, you know what, I really did want to, you know, just really gut them. You know, they're just, it's not going to happen. Now, when she was like, I would go in there to like wake them up because I was scared or whatever, you could take that at face value. I mean, you know, she's a little kid, like, hey, maybe that would happen. Something felt weird about it to me, but I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of going at face value with a lot of this stuff, so it's just like, no, I didn't do this. This is when I went into her room. And again, if the Barnetts had been somewhat reputable, somewhat not off the chain, I might go down the pathway more of being like, you know, more in their favor, if you will. But because of their behavior and because of all the stuff about them, I just feel like you can't believe anything they say at this point, right? I mean, I just don't believe it. The dad, the show that he put on and the behavior that he exhibited through all of those episodes was, I mean, so all over the place. I was literally just like, I mean, this is not good. I'm trying to imagine what life would have been like in that household.
Here's the thing. There's this big debate about how old you are. To me, it doesn't make any difference. You're a human being that needs love and caring and nurturance. It doesn't make a difference to me if you're 43 or 14. It doesn't make a difference to you, does it?
No,
Right,
no, not at all,
absolutely.
not at
No,
all.
no,
Yeah,
no,
you're
no.
right.
Okay, so well, I'm glad Dr. Phil ended on this note because at the end of the day, this is how I walked away from the docuseries, right? Where I was like, look, whether the girl's 8 or damn 22 or whatever, she didn't need to be in an apartment by herself out in the community, dumped off in the community. Number one, if what the Barnetts allege is true and they're just like, okay, let's forget about you and put you over here and let you be everybody else's problem, that's not cool. Secondly, you know, just like all the neighbors, like even the neighbors that were like, look, yeah, we wanted her gone, but we had concerns like she didn't look like she could bathe herself, take care of herself. You know, how can she get groceries in? Like all these basic things, right? That's where I'm like, yeah, this is not right. You know, literally they were abandoning a person unable to care for themselves, especially when they got to the point of going to Canada and put her in that secondary apartment where the stairs went upstairs. Now also, but the thing you have to look at it from their side is number one, it's clear they want her gone, right? Whatever the reasoning is, we'll never know. They wanted her gone. Okay. In their world, she was 22 years old. So you could look at it like, this is a 22-year-old. We've done everything. Here's your little GED. Here's your little grocery store. We're gone, right? Now, when the evidence comes out that no, everything points to this was a young child, changes everything. Now, again, if you remember back to the docuseries, when he was like, he meaning the father, was like, after the trial and he was found not guilty, and he's like, it only took him an hour and they knew I wasn't guilty. Well, they talked to the juror who was like, yeah, right off the rip, we all thought he was guilty, 12 guilty votes, but because of the evidence and the way it had to be done, they were like, we were heartbroken that we were going to have to say not guilty because we had to follow the orders. And that's how he ended up there. Now, let's talk about a couple of more quick little updates real quick. Okay, now I'm putting up on the screen a screenshot of the Ask Me Anything. So if you watch the docuseries, you'll know that there was a legal analyst in it, Beth Karas, and she didn't ask me anything. Now, I'm putting this up there, number one, just so you can see it, so you can like Google it or whatever yourself if you want to go to it. And I'm going to suggest that you go to it. And I'm also putting the link down below. Now, here's the thing. The reason I'm saying to go do this and check it out is because of this. Not for her answers, because honestly, she barely answers any question, and the stuff that she does is like, tune in to find out. I mean, it's really like a commercial, okay? But reading the comments, okay? go check this out and read the comments. This is where it became like, oh, okay, like there's, a lot more going on here, right? So I wanted to put this up there just to say, look, check this out, go see what you think of it, and there's that. And you can see just from the picture, there's some links in there as well. Click those, check them out, and I'd be curious to know what you think. Come back to the comment section and talk about it. Now let's get on to the GoFundMe. Okay, so I put on the screen the GoFundMe that is being raised. Now you can pause to read it, but essentially what they are saying is they are trying to get a van, a van that is equipped for Natalia. Now also they do mention in here, like this whole dream trip to Jerusalem. So I can't really tell if it's like they're wanting it for both or whatever, but the whole goal of it is the 10 grand for that. Now here's the thing with this. So at the time you can see this is $2,900.13 or not 13 cents, you know what I'm saying? $2,913. Again, they're trying to get to $10,000. Now, a lot of people had a lot to say about this. Here's the thing with GoFundMes. I think that they can do a lot of good, right? Because obviously crowdsourcing, I mean, these can literally change lives, but also bring things out. Like say somebody's trying to start, I don't know, like a business or something like that. Like it can really make a lot of stuff happen. Now, here's also the thing that's just as important as what the cause is for is the timing of it. And unfortunately with this right here, it's very clear. I mean, anybody would, if you were going to be like, when's the best time to launch this? Well, it's clearly now because this is blown up and it's getting all this attention. The case is what I'm talking about. So to put this back out there, it's like, okay, great. Now the star of Little People Big World, Matt Roloff, he was like promoting this for her and whatnot. A lot of people had a lot to say about that too, because they were just like, hello, do you not have $10,000? Kind of a thing, right? So he's gotten behind her, he's gotten behind the cause. Now, this brings us to kind of like some overall thoughts about stuff. And let's talk about this right here. And let's talk about overall how I feel about Natalia with her new family. Here's my thing. I have no doubt, just like Dr. Phil said, if she's 40, 10, 8, not whatever, she's going to want to be loved. She's going to want to belong. If she has found that with this family, then so be it. If she is happy and great, wonderful, right? Because at this point, this case has become so blown up, you don't know which way to turn. There could be evidence here and then this and that, and right? So she has found her people, which she says she has. Like this, she thought it was the Barnetts, but she's found it with these people. Then great. Awesome for her. What I fear for her is that she has led a life where she has been surrounded by people exploiting her. Now, remember when this family took her in, they switched her social security stuff over to get that in. They also used her food stamp money. Now, again, according to Cynthia, it was, they made her food and this and that. Now the Barnetts were like, oh, well, we tried to call, Adult Protective Services, when they took, the social security and all this. So it's almost like this, 6 1 half dozen the other, right? You have the Barnetts who are exploiting her and then dumped her off. Then you have these people who could potentially be exploiting her, but she's living there and allegedly is very happy and it's fit in. So it's one of those type things where if they're both getting something out of it, okay, then it's not harming anybody and everybody's in agreement, so no one's being exploited, then go for it, right? Who am I to say anything? Now, let's talk about her age. And again, I still am like this, y'all. This is how I feel. Something feels off about this entire thing. And I think part of it is because everyone surrounding this case, there's just something odd about it. It's this oddball type thing. You look at the Barnetts, you look at, the new adoptive parents and how, just the behavior and, we took her in and, it's just odd, right? Not to mean that it's good or bad because, obviously she's living there, right? And again, if she's not being hurt, then great, somebody took her in and she's found her home. So I think because all of that oddness surrounds this case, it makes it all like, huh? And so many mistruths and lies were put out that you no longer know which way to go, unfortunately. Now, also, when it comes to Natalia's looks and whatnot, one thing I felt like the documentary, and I might have said this earlier, but I'll say it again. One thing I felt like the documentary was not very truthful on is the fact that they kind of like they didn't sit here and say, this picture is from this year, this picture is from this year. Because if you, and you can Google these and find these, but if you look at the timeline of photographs and stuff, there's clearly an age progression in her face, right? Now, if you were to ask me how old she is in Dr. Phil, I mean, if she's like saying, you know, she's 16, I would say she's older, you know, but again, you know, because of her condition, it's hard for me to judge. And that also adds into all of this. I almost have to look at her in comparison to herself. And in comparison to herself, when you look at even the pictures from Disney World that the Barnetts took her on, I'm like, she's clearly a different age, right? She clearly is a different age then. She looks way younger in the Disney World picture. So this is where I'm coming back around to being like, you know what? Now here's my thing. Could she have been fudged a little bit? Like, say when it all went off and started and they're like, we're going to say she's a little bit, you know, whatever to look good for adoption? Sure. Are we talking 10, 15, 20 years? And no, right? I do not think that happened at all, right? Now, through the years, obviously, there's been this stuff that's gone on with the fudging of her age. Now she's 22, but now she's 28, now she's 14, this and that. Also, at the center of it, nothing makes sense. The timeline doesn't make sense, and we don't know where that information comes from, because like with the things that Natalia says, like I said earlier, well, I lived in 30 homes and I came over and I did this and blah, 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 blah. And like, how did you do all this by age 8 or 6 or whatever it was? It doesn't make sense. But then also, you can't trust anything that the Barnetts told her. So you have this whole thing like that. I have no doubt that she probably lies about stuff. This is a common sign in people that have lived through something like what she has lived through, right? In the system with, you know, possible abuse being done to them, abandonment, all that type of stuff. I do not know what it is like to be shuffled from home to home and put up for adoption. I am not going to try and sit here and say, well, I would do this or that. I don't know what that's like. It is not my place to even try and think for 1 second, you know, oh, well, I would react like this, because I have absolutely no way to judge that, right? So what I have seen is, I'm like, yeah, this is a lot. This is par for the course with this type of stuff, right? I mean, I know I wouldn't want to feel abandoned over and over and over. I can't fathom what that would be like. Do I think there's been lies told along the way by everybody? Yes. To what degree? I have no idea. Have I changed my mind on her age? Yes. If you watch my last video, I was very murky about it and basically was like, I don't think she's 22, but I don't think she was 6 years old either. And I basically still stand at that. And in my world, I'm like, I do think that that was probably her birthday. And if anything, they fudged it by a year or two, right? For whatever reason. But there's so many different documents that say otherwise. Now, again, if you have been following this and you're like, no, Paul, go to this website. This proves that she is 22. Drop it, right? I want to see it, because I can't let go of this. What I find with these cases, that it's like there's some component that you just can't solve it. You just can't put your finger on it. I mean, it's hard to walk away from, right? So anyways, I've talked your ears off. If you're still here, drop sofas in the comment section so Roscoe can hide under them. And that's it. I hope you're all doing well. Please let me know what you think in the comment sections. I'm dying to hear your opinions. And we're going to keep following this, because I feel like more information is going to keep coming out. So that's it until we gather around my new phone, because the battery melted the other day in the old one. I'll see y'all soon.